Today's big question that we will be discussing is, are real life friends better than online ones? I will be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. I am Dr. Tom Crawford. I'm one of the maths tutors at St Edmund Hall here at the University of Oxford. And I also do lots of things on YouTube with my channel, Tom Rocks Maths. I'm wearing my merchandise. And you may also recognize me from Numberphile. So if you've got any big maths fans out there who watch YouTube maths videos, you may spot me in a Numberphile video or two. So I think it's about time we met our amazing guests. So first of all, we have Mary. Mary, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thank you, Tom. I'm Mary. I'm a psychologist, and in specific, I'm a social psychologist and an evolutionary psychologist. And my research is looking at how our social network, so this is all the relationships you have to both friends and family, how that changes when you move away from home to attend university. So if you were to come to Oxford, for instance, you'd be going through this yourself. And how, because we're now in a different place, how that changes existing relationships, how you make new friendships, and how that's impacting your overall happiness and well-being.
Amazing. So psychology, sociology, anything to do with university in relation to friendships. Sounds like Mary is going to be our go-to person for those kinds of topics. Nicholas, your turn.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nicholas. And I am a behavioral scientist, if that means anything to you. It doesn't have to. I am generally interested in the effects of technology on our well-being and on our performance, mostly from a standpoint of, how a lot of people are concerned that, for example, using a lot of social media makes you addicted and makes you feel very bad about yourself. And I generally try to see whether there's any evidence for those sort of claims.
Interesting. So is this kind of anything to do with technology, social media? Is it good? Is it bad? I'm sure we all have very strong opinions about this. It sounds like Nicholas would be more than happy to discuss those and use his expertise there. Right. So thank you very much. You've met our panel. I've already introduced myself. I am not an expert, right? I'm a mathematician, but I guess because I do lots of work online with Tom Rocks Maths and YouTube, I'd like to think that I can offer some insights. So I will be sharing some of my own personal insights as well, along with our expert panel. Okay, and we're going to kick off with a poll, as promised. And this is, of course, very relevant in the current situation that we find ourselves in. So hopefully this poll, I can see it's on my screen, so hopefully it's on everyone else's screen and you can now vote. And the question is, have you managed to stay in touch with all of your friends during the lockdown? So we've tried to give you a range of answers because I don't think there's a necessary yes or no answer to this question. So hopefully if your specific answer isn't there, I guess vote for the one that you think best describes your feelings about whether you've stayed in touch with all of your friends. But if anyone wants to share any of their own thoughts or what their perfect answer would be, of course, feel free to share that in the chat. Maybe bring it up for discussion. Okay, I think we're done. Right. So there's the poll has closed. So I can see here. Oh, there's quite the split. So hopefully everyone else can see this. But just to summarize. Yes, we are still just as close, has come in at 39%. So that leads the way, but it's very close because we say, yes, we've drifted apart, has got 31%, and only my strongest friendships have maintained, has also got 31%. And is that zero for no, it has been too hard? Wow, okay. So everyone, it feels like everyone's feeling reasonably positive. That's very interesting. Also, I can't help but spot that as a mathematician, the total is 101% of those numbers. So if anyone can tell me why, let me know in the chat. Okay, brilliant. So let's actually put the big question, are real friends better than online ones, to our panel. So Mary, what do you make of this question?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially right now, because we're all kind of navigating it for ourselves and working out if we feel it's true or if it's not so true. And if we look back a long time ago, 2000 years ago, Aristotle, a philosopher, already said that without friends, no one would choose to live because they're so important to us. And we have so much data and so much research showing that maintaining close friendships is really important, not only for our overall happiness, but also for our physical and our mental health. So you're genuinely just feeling better, doing better if you have friendships in your life. And normally we spend around 5 hours every day socializing in some way. So this might also be with your family members. It doesn't just have to be with friends, but 5 hours is a large chunk of your day. And normally speaking, 80% of that is face-to-face interaction. So by that alone, we might assume that face-to-face is really what sort of signifies a valuable friendship. And indeed, there have been some studies that seem to suggest that face-to-face contact is really important. So there's a strong relationship between how much face-to-face time you're spending with a friend and your happiness level. So if you spend more time with a friend, sitting next to each other, playing something together, your happiness is going to be higher. And this wasn't found when we were looking at different ways of staying in touch. So if you're text messaging, if you're using any sort of social media interactions, and even the study is a little bit old, so people used to use Skype to talk virtually. Zoom wasn't a thing. Even when talking via Skype, we didn't see this boost in happiness. So that might make you think, okay, real friendships are a lot more important and are a lot more valuable than online friendships. However, I think as you may have been navigating yourself, and we saw that in the poll, that the majority of you feel just as close, there are some great advantages to virtual friendships as well. One of them is that whenever you're interacting with someone virtually, it's more of a deliberate thing, right? You've made the decision to reach out, you made the decision to connect. And so it feels more, there's a higher level of investment because you're showing each other, hey, I care about actually interacting with you. So in that sense, you might say that the quality of the interaction is actually more valuable because it's not a chance encounter. I hear someone who should be muted, but that's okay.
It's all right, it's fixed,
That's all right.
fixed. We're good.
And at the same time, we are also able to interact more frequently, but without an immediate pressure to respond. So you might be sending friends like funny images of something that made you laugh, and you're sending it to them without the expectation of them immediately responding, but knowing that you might make their day, or you might just give them a little bit of happiness if they come across it later on. It's also really good for flexible interaction. So some people really love leaving each other voice notes, for instance, and you can share about your day without necessarily taking away from the person's timetable and without like interjecting into their day-to-day, knowing they can listen to it when they want to. There's also interesting research showing that there's some unique advantages to these virtual connections. So in terms of intimacy levels, we sometimes find that the exchange that we're having virtually can be, which might be a paradox, more intimate than the one that we normally have face-to-face. This is because it can be easier for us to open up when we're not sort of like looking the other person in the face, revealing something about ourselves that makes us vulnerable. It's a little bit easier if maybe we don't see the other person's facial reactions, and that allows us to open up in a way that otherwise maybe we're a little bit too shy to do. And then another really big positive of virtual friendships is that geography doesn't matter so much. So where you are, if you are next door or whether you are in a different country, you could even be halfway across the globe, you can still stay in touch. And this is quite wonderful because normally our friendships are very much dependent on proximity. So how close are you physically to someone else? Whereas this way, it's a lot more about choice. So you can go and whoever you've met on a holiday, for instance, if they're living in a different country, it's your choice if you want to stay in touch or not. You're not bound by any sort of constraints in terms of how far away they are. And you can even take it a step further and you can deliberately form friendships with people who you share some similar interest with. So you can join some forums, you can go to particular groups that are sort of attracting people that are interested in certain things. And you can form friendships with someone who you might never meet and who you might have never come across normally. But because the internet exists, you can kind of seek them out and really have fun there. And then lastly, there's something to consider in terms of gender differences. Always keep in mind whenever we look at we look at data, it's looking at the average of like a large group of people. So this might not be true for you, this might not be true for everyone you know, but on the whole, there's a tendency to say that girls or women meet so they can talk. So the primary motivation to come together is to basically talk to one another and kind of exchange information, feelings, and stories. And we might also say that for boys and for men, they tend to talk because they meet. So they need to meet to do something together, whatever that might be. And it can be playing sports. It can also just be watching sports. It doesn't have to be actively. You can just sit there, have a cup of tea and sit around and do nothing. But it's kind of because they happen to be together that is then opening the doors for a little chat. And so sometimes with the virtual friendships, it can be a little bit more challenging for boys or for men at first to just pick up the phone to catch up with someone. And a really nice way that might be overcome is through online gaming, for instance, where you have a shared purpose and you kind of having this like action that you're going at together. And while you're doing that, you might communicate via headsets, and that's sort of then getting to the same level of friendships as well. And overall, last but not least, the most important things in friendships is how much you laugh together. So as much as you can, shared laughter is really sort of the guarantee for living a really happy life. And so whether that happens virtually via sending each other funny things or talking to each other or in person is really very much up to you. So you're ultimately in charge of the quality of your friendship, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual.
Thank you, Mary. Lots of amazing ideas. I think something that really stood out for me, you mentioned the 5 hours a day of socializing. That's something I'd never heard of before. And at first, almost I don't believe it. But then when I start to think about the time you spend, you know, WhatsApping my friends or whatever, you know, chatting to somebody before you have your meeting, you say hello, and like it, I can see how that would build up. So yeah, that's interesting. I think maybe you can think about in the audience, how long do you think you actually spend? Can you find those 5 hours in an average day when you're spending socializing? Okay, Nicholas, anything to add on our big question? Are real friends better than online ones?
Not that much. That was a really a great overview. But let me try. So I have a couple of visualizations. I hope that's because I'm not
Fabulous.
that good as a free speaker as Mary is. So as you can see, my take on the big question in the parentheses at the bottom there, that I want to take a critical stance to the very question, meaning I think a lot of you will notice that people asking that question are often people my age and older, which means people who have not grown up with the internet. So we have this weird conception of there's this one box where you keep your online friends, you know, and those are completely separate from your other box where you keep your offline friends. And I would argue, and that's also what research suggests, that there is what's generally called an offline to online trend, meaning most people, and as Mary said, I'm talking to the average here in general, most people make friends and there is a merging of the online and the offline, meaning you communicate with the people you've met in school, met in sports, and vice versa. So maybe it's not the best idea to call one of those the real thing and the other one what the unreal thing, but rather see them as complementing each other. That said, I think that it makes sense to talk about opportunities and not necessarily advantages and disadvantages of online versus offline, but rather online versus online communication. And for online, we know that also what Mary touched upon, it's really nice that you have control. In the sense, if you don't have to react immediately, you can, like at your age, you want to try out certain things, you're figuring out who you are. So someone who's very shy, for example, it can be really nice for that person to go to a chat group and just try out being extroverted for a day. How does it feel like? That is something that you cannot really do in offline communication, can you? Can't just be shy one day and the next day you run around being super extroverted. That will probably be a bit strange to other people. So I think that's a massive opportunity, at least for online communication. You can try out what you like, as Tom was saying earlier in the statement. It's really easy to find like-minded people. Maybe you have a very niche interest. There's something that interests you that you would think like not a lot of people are interested in that, and then go on the internet and see how many thousands of people across the planet share your interest. And that's nice to have, to build a community there. At the same time, for offline, obviously, I'm not arguing that we should do everything online. human beings are a social species and we live off direct feedback, meaning non-verbal stuff, cues such as me waving my hands, non-verbal cues, how my face looks when you say stuff to me. And obviously it's important that we learn this. It's important that we acquire social skills. And at the same time, and it doesn't, I mean, you cannot really hug someone over the internet, can you? So physical contact, I mean, that's rather obvious, is something that we all like and do in offline communication. So what do I want to say? I think it makes more sense to see online and offline as two sides of the same coin. And rather than talking about offline versus online opportunities, I just call them opportunities and treat them as integrated and complementing each other.
I think you make a really good point, actually, of looking at them in that combination of you kind of want both interactions and take all of the positives from both things to really build a strong friendship. So I just have a couple of points to add from my personal perspective, as I mentioned. So for me, I really enjoy the fact that when I make a YouTube video, that I can interact with my viewers through the comments. If I'm doing a live stream or a premiere of a new video, I can have live feedback and interaction with the viewers. Again, okay, it's done online through chat, but for me, that's really amazing that you're actually able to have that interaction that otherwise wouldn't exist. So I really enjoy that, the fact that that is possible with the online audience. Now, whether I would call those people friends is another question. I think that really depends on, it almost feels to me like there's a critical level of knowing somebody when you would perhaps call them your friend. And I know that there's lots of interesting studies and research around this that says that often people that you yourself would call friends, like half of them or something, I think, would say that not necessarily call you one of their friends. So this is, I think it's obvious your very close group of friends, you know, you're like your best friends. I think everyone's kind of in agreement, but then there's kind of like a boundary of different people have different, that critical level of how well they know somebody. So whether they would or wouldn't call them a friend. And something else that have sort of with my experience through YouTube as well, has been again related to Nicholas, was this idea of the niche. So we've got here a video that I made with a mathematician called Steve. He has his own channel, Black Pen, Red Pen, and Steve is based in California. So myself and Steve, it's quite difficult for us to meet, but we both love solving maths questions. So we were able, through online communication, to get to know one another. We chatted a little bit, came up with an idea for a video, and then we were able to work together, you know, and collaborate to create this online video. So I think that's something, and I would now call Steve a friend, I think, having spent enough time with him and discussed and worked on this project together. And another example, which is sort of perhaps a very similar thing, but led to an in-person meeting and collaboration, was again, through my sort of the niche community of online mathematicians, I was able to meet Grant, who runs the channel 3 Blue 1 Brown, which is another maths YouTube channel. And it just turned out that when we were talking online through our love of making maths videos and teaching maths, that Grant was coming to the UK for an event. And so we were actually able to arrange to then meet in person and then record this video together. Of course, this was done in 2019, pre-pandemic. But we were able to do this and actually create, again, work together. And we spent a few days hanging out. I gave Grant a tour of Oxford. And again, I would like to think that we became friends as a result of that initial online interaction and sort of finding each other and our niche and the things that we like to then become friends. So I think it really, like both of our speakers have said, I think there's lots of pros to both sides, and you can really have this overlap, I think, as Nicholas mentioned, between the two things rather than keeping them separate. So that's a few things hopefully to sort of get you all thinking and start the discussion. And of course, this event is happening with, I've just seen somebody pop up and say they're from Zimbabwe. That's amazing. And this is another thing about the online sort of community. So we've got another poll for you now. So you've heard from us as the experts and myself about our thoughts on the question. So this is your chance to vote for what you think is the answer. Well, your perspective. I shouldn't say there isn't a right answer, of course. Your perspective on our big question. So are real life friends better than online friends? So we've got yes, real life friends are always the best. Very, very firm. No, in fact, online friends can offer more. Also quite strong, but in the opposite direction. Maybe. So we can sit on the fence. Sometimes this depends on your social circles and the kind of supports that you want. And finally, I think they are different, but both equally good. So there's a good range again of options for you there. So again, if you can pick the one that you think fits best with your perspective and your thinking, and like before, if you want to share in the chat what your perfect answer would be or your opinion, please do. I can see that there's lots of interesting messages and discussion happening, which is great. The poll is closed. Okay, that kind of worked in time. There we go. Right, results are in. Okay, I like this immediate results without any counting. So yes, real life friends are the best, 22%. So almost a quarter of you are very strongly in favor of real friends versus online friends. Interesting. We have a couple of votes for no, saying that online friends can offer more, but it seems to be quite in the minority. Almost half of you, that 45%, have said maybe, sort of sitting on the fence. And then we've got about a third of you saying that they are different, but equally good. That's interesting. And this time our total is 100%. Good. Okay, so the Zoom poll is working correctly. All right, so thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now we come to hopefully the best bit of the event, of what you've all been waiting for, which is the opportunity to actually put your questions to our panel. You've heard from Mary and Nicholas and myself a little bit on our thoughts on the big question. You've obviously shared your thoughts a little bit in the polls. So again, thank you for doing that. So now let's sort of put your questions, to our experts. And just as a reminder, please do remember to add your name so I can say hello. And if you add your school, then we know where to send the prize for the most thought-provoking question. And that will be given out regardless of whether or not we ask the question. So I've got a question of my own, actually, which I think I'm going to start with, just because it's probably on everyone's minds. And that's going to be the pandemic, obviously, COVID. And what I'm really interested to hear the thoughts of from our panel is how the role of social media has changed during the pandemic in terms of our personal lives, in terms of studying. Is there a case of saying we're almost too reliant on this technology? And what do you think might happen once the pandemic is over and we return to some degree of normality? Will the role change of social media and online communication? So Mary, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think on the one hand, especially when it comes to how parents might feel about spending times with screens, right? I think there's been a big shift towards being a lot more okay with spending a lot more time in the virtual world, because school happened virtually for most of us for a very long time. And that can be both a boon and a bane, because on the one hand, it might be more acceptable to spend a lot of the largest proportion of your day online. At the same time, when it comes to socializing, you might also just be quite tired from looking at the screen every single day. So it might no longer be this exciting thing you get to do after school, after life has already happened, but it's just another thing that you've got to do online. So it's both a positive and a negative, I suppose. Something that makes a really big difference in terms of your well-being is whether you're passively consuming social media or whether you're actively interacting with people. So we see this a lot, that if you're just sort of scrolling through people's feed, especially if it's people that seem to be doing better than you, all these, people on Instagram that look like their life is just magical at all points in time. If you're just sort of passively like lurking in the corners, looking at what's happening, it's quite likely that that might have a negative impact on you, because you feel even more isolated, you feel even more alone and sort of disconnected from the world, and maybe disconnected from all the things you'd much rather be doing than sitting at home. But you can turn this around. If you're actively interacting with other people, if you're, what I was saying earlier, if it's targeted interactions with specific people that you're actually wanting to like sort of mindfully, like consciously share something with, then it can actually be a really, really great tool, and it can be really helpful to feel less alone. So ideally, you want to make sure that if you are spending time online, you're spending at least as much time interacting with people than just watching people. And you might even play around with this as a bit of an experiment and see what happens if you spend an hour just scrolling and you don't even like anything, versus spending an hour like just interacting with people, and just notice how you feel. And my inkling would be that you're much happier in that second scenario.
Thank you, Mary. Nicholas, anything to add on the social media aspect?
No, I think those are excellent points. The obviously, when we talk about whether the role of social media has changed, I think what has mostly changed is our perception of social media. If you think back, I don't know, most people in the audience will be too young to remember this, but when Facebook first came around, what was it, like 13 years ago or something, everyone was really concerned. Like whenever there's new technology coming, people immediately think like, oh God, what's it going to do to our well-being? Are we all going to get addicted? And what the pandemic has shown, in my view, is that we can have a very healthy relationship with the tools that we have, and that's how I see social media as a tool. There's nothing inherently evil about it in that sense. It's about how we use it. And I think that this discussion, thankfully, has taken a more healthy turn, because it probably nobody's helped if you tell them that social media are just inherently bad for you.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. It's like with anything, it's how you use that particular tool or thing, like, sort of in moderation, or using it in a healthy way, I think. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Nicholas. Right, we've got a great question from Sophie in Newbridge. Hello, Sophie. Thank you for the question. Do you think friendships are more disposable virtually? Now that, to me, is a fantastic question. Do we have, I guess, Nicholas, let's throw to you first. What do you think, Nicholas? Are friendships more disposable virtually?
This is going to be very, it's not going to be a satisfying answer. But it always depends with this sort of stuff. Because if you, Sophie, why do you ask this? Is it because you feel like one of your friends has been neglecting your friendship online? Then it depends on where you're coming from, right? I would say that it's not that most of us enjoy friendships with others. And then it shouldn't matter as much where they are coming from. I don't think there's something like disposable at online friendships. It depends on how you maintain that friendship and how you interact with other people.
Mm-hmm. And Mary, did you have anything to add?
So it depends a little on if you are purely online friends or if you have actually met offline in the past. That might set a different trajectory from that friendship. And it also, from a social network perspective, depends a little bit on whether that online friend is connected to anybody else in your network. Because normally, if we have a friend that is connected to other friends and family, where they're sort of part of this little ball of yarn of people that are around us, and those are quite hard to get rid of in some ways, because you'll hear about them and you'll be updated, and you might meet them in sort of larger group gatherings, whether online or offline. Versus if you're making an isolated friend somewhere that is not connected to anybody else in your network, those people are genuinely easier to lose sight of. So this might apply to both online or offline friendships. And it might also depend on how close or how emotionally intense the friendship was. So if it's a fleeting acquaintance, there's a lot of turnover in our networks all the time where people come and go. If it's someone, even if it's an isolated individual online that you connect with because you have something in common with that person, you're so excited you finally met them, you're not going to let go of them, right? So it's a lot of factors that come together that will make that choice.
Yeah, agreed. Now we've had a couple of questions come in around a very important topic, which is about how people can often behave differently online versus in person. So we've got one which came in from Harriet, who is in, I'm going to apologize. I think this is the school name. It's in Welsh, and I definitely cannot speak or pronounce Welsh. But thank you very much, Harriet, for sending in your question. But the actual question, there's, well, very similar question, also from George, who's in Framlingham Earl High School. Hello, George. Also, hello, Harriet. And he says, can online friends give us false interactions? We can believe someone is being genuine. However, unless we have that physical contact, it makes it harder for us to know someone else's true intentions. So I think both of them are discussing this kind of aspect of someone behaving differently online versus in person. And is there anything that we can do about that, or sort of look into that? So Nicholas, you said you were a behavior scientist. So this to me sounds like a question to do with behavior of people online versus offline. Do you have anything to add to this discussion?
Yeah, so if we just take this question at face value, can someone deceive you online? Then the answer is obviously yes. Yes, someone can deceive you online, but they could also deceive you offline. Question is, how good of an actor or an actress is someone in offline life, so they could deceive you offline as well, right? So that's what I mean when in my 3 minutes that I had earlier, when we talk about opportunities. Online does give you opportunity for what we call in psychology self-presentation. You can selectively put together an image that you want. And I saw that earlier in the chat that a lot of you thought that this was dishonest, that this wasn't something you should do. Like, you should be a person of integrity, you shouldn't change who you are. And obviously I agree with you. I'm not saying you should lie to people, but it's pretty normal at a certain age to try to figure out what you want to be and try out different aspects of your personality. All of us, none of us are always the same. That doesn't mean we're dishonest. I would say online gives us opportunities to try out certain aspects of our personality. But yes, you're right, that can come with a risk of someone being disingenuous and maybe sometimes even dishonest.
Mary, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, it's an absolutely great point, because evolutionarily speaking, the first assessment we make whenever we meet anyone ever for the first time is whether they're trustworthy or not. And this is essentially super important for survival. If you think about it back in the day, is this person going to hit you on the head or are they not, right? So this is quite an important thing to think about. And you're right in assuming that virtually it's a lot more difficult to discern that. And I've also read some of the comments about safety meeting people online, and that is something to keep in mind, because some people will be posing for someone that they're not, right? So from the position of you meeting strangers online that you're unsure about, I absolutely understand that caution plays a role, and you might want to test things out and see if this is really who they say they are, and if your information is safe with them, and be very cautious about whatever you might want to send to people that you don't actually know offline as well. At the same time, I've also read really interesting comments earlier about some people saying that in online friendships, you allow yourself to show more up as who you are, and you are able to show some facets. And that's something that Nicholas was saying earlier, maybe some areas of yourself that you're shying away from showing to other people. So again, I always try to spin this in a positive way and think, okay, if I'm okay with sharing this with someone who maybe I'm interacting with online more than in real life, maybe this can be a little bit of a test, if it's safe with them, and if they seem like they're accepting that about me, maybe I can also show parts of this to my offline friends and see if they might also be more okay with this than I think, right? So I get the being cautious bit. I think that's actually quite important to keep in mind, because if you've never met online, who knows who's on the other end of that conversation? So that's something to really keep in mind. But if it is someone that you've met offline before, that you feel is safe, that you've gotten to know, you can almost see this as an opportunity to show up as different like aspects of yourself and see like, does this suit me? Does this fit me? How does this work? And then how can I integrate that in my offline world so that you don't have, as Nicholas was saying, you don't have this virtual world and this offline world, and they're two completely different things, but merging them together and sort of integrating them into your social world. That's kind of the outcome that would be most preferable.
Yeah, agreed. Very good points. Thank you both. Great question from Charlotte at Marling School. Hello, Charlotte. Thank you for the question. Can you see any future implications for the current generation due to the inability to socialize face-to-face over the past year? So on that sort of missing out on that, because I think, Nicholas, you mentioned that social skills and physical touch and various things that you can, of course, only really learn in the offline environment. So can you see any sort of long-term impacts from that over the last year?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, this is a really, I don't want to swear, but it's this
is a PG program.
I know. This is a really tough situation, and I can only imagine how hard this must be for a lot of you. And it's only normal at your age that you want to socialize with your friends, that you want to meet them. So this is hard. And I think that more people should acknowledge this, how hard this is for you. Whether long-term consequences, I mean, ideally at some point we get over this period and you're going to be able to meet up with your friends again. But yeah, I don't want to make light of this. It's not easy. And I think, especially in those cases where you cannot see your friends in person, it is really nice to at least have social media, to at least have technology to communicate with your friends.
Mm-hmm. Mary?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a situation that no one chose, right? And that we're just sort of in. I think it very much depends on what you'll make of it. So there is, and something that I've also picked up on the comments, people saying they're a bit more shy when it's offline and it's easier online, right? And I think there's a risk of becoming so comfortable with the online interactions that we might shy away from the offline ones once we are allowed to really fully engage with them again. And I think the recommendation there would just be to consistently kind of test whether you can venture out of your comfort zone again. I think this is something that is going to become really important because we'll just get really shy right now, and we might feel weird with like large crowds because we're not used to them. We might feel strange like just being in close proximity to other people because we've been almost conditioning ourselves to stay away, knowing that that was what was required. So what I have always noticed whenever I speak to individuals and also in my research, when you ask a person on their own, like, would you like to hang out with other people? They're like, yeah, absolutely, I would. But there's a really big stigma. It's almost the biggest stigma there is to acknowledging that you're socially lonely and that you feel like you don't have enough friends and you feel like you're kind of like a bit of an outsider and a loner. So if you ask these people in a group, would you like to hang out? Everyone will say, no, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm perfectly all right, right? So the one thing that I would really encourage you to take away is that everyone feels this way. And it usually takes one brave person to break the stigma. So whenever you are allowed to meet with other people again, make use of like the option to go first and make use of being the one that's like, hey, do you want to do this? Hey, do you want to do that? Knowing maybe people will be too scared and they'll say no, but at least you're sort of getting the ball rolling. And I think if we all collectively do that, then we can minimize any negative effects in the long run.
Definitely. Sound advice, Mary, thank you. And actually there's I've noticed there's been a few questions that are sort of related to perhaps more of an advice thing about how to maintain friendships in the current situation. And in particular, one that I've got here from Maisie, who's at Blessed Thomas Holford Catholic College. Hello, Maisie, thank you for the question. So she said that she thinks it's very important for us to talk to each other over social media, especially in the pandemic, but she's found that her and her friends have drifted a little. So do either of you have any suggestions or any advice for people who are finding perhaps that they're drifting a little? Is there anything from, I guess, a scientific or academic perspective that you could suggest for people to try to regain that friendship or try to make up for that lack of in-person contact? I guess, Mary, I think I can see you nodding, so I'll go to you first this time.
Yeah, I think it's all about lowering the hurdle. So sometimes when we are in touch with people on a daily basis, it's quite easy to just send them a funny picture that we come across. And if there's been a lag, if there's been a longer period of no contact, somehow it feels like the hurdle is larger and it has to be this like profound message or this like great thing that you're coming up with. So I just invite you to challenge that. And it's quite often okay to just send a very small snippet of something. It doesn't really have to be this like thought through long message about like, we've drifted apart, I'd like us to be close. It's fine to just be something funny that you come across. So anything that makes you think of them, I think, is a great conversation starter. Sometimes it can be helpful to think about entire groups to reconnect with. This is cognitively easier on our brains because we can maintain contact with a larger number of people by just doing a group thing, right? So whether you're playing an online game together, whether you're doing an online Zoom or whatever it might be together, that can be quite a clever way to get in touch with people that maybe one-on-one it feels a little bit strange, but in a group you're quite excited to get in touch with them again. And then whenever this is about other people that you're in school with together, sometimes it can be really helpful to do something that is surrounding a common goal. So if you have, I know you're not sitting exams, right? So it's a little bit different. But if there's something that you want to achieve together, whether this is a school project or whether this is something outside of school that has a common or shared interest at the foundation of it, that can be quite great because it is easier then to hold each other accountable of being regularly in touch if it's for the good of some sort of project or some sort of outcome. So any of those might be helpful starting points, I hope.
I agree with you massively on the gaming, the online game thing. So for me and my friends, it sort of almost felt a little awkward to just have a video chat because it's just something we'd never done before because we hadn't spoken for a while. You know, we ended up playing, I think we ended up playing online Guitar Hero together. And that was just a really good way to interact and rebuild that thing.
And a really like last thing I just thought about, like from a social psychological point of view, it's really counterintuitive, but it makes sense. If you ask someone else for a favor, they will like you more as a result, which is crazy, right? Because we think if we do someone a favor, they will like us more. But no, if someone does you a favor, they like you more. So if you ask for a little bit of help around whatever it is that you can think that you might need help with, that might actually be a good way of rekindling friendships too. Because as you were saying, Tom, it can be awkward to out of the blue be like, do you want to talk to me? That's a little scary, right?
Right, very quickly, Nicholas, do you have anything to add as and where we're running very short on time?
No, I make this quick. I think that all of this excellent advice, especially the planning common activities. I just want to add to, I mean, that's what technology is for, right? It's sort of, you don't have to walk to your landline and then call someone. if something cool happens, to just share it immediately. That's one of the coolest things about friendship is self-disclosure and sharing. So if something in your everyday life happens, just don't be afraid to share that. Like a random picture, a random message, just telling what's happening to you, that might help you with getting back closer to friends that you felt like you were drifting apart a bit.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, and we are now definitely out of time. So thank you to both of our experts, Nicholas and Mary. It's been really good fun, and I think you've shared a lot of really interesting insights. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining, everyone watching. Thank you for all your questions. Sorry I didn't get to more of them. It's always very difficult to pick out specific questions. But again, all the questions that have been typed will be entered into the competition. And the winner for the most thought-provoking question will be announced by the end of the week. So final thing is to just say, if you want to continue the discussion around this question, are real-life friends better than online ones? There's loads of excellent resources on the Oxplore website, OXPLORE, oxplore.org. And there's loads of extra bonus material, videos, articles, all kinds of things if you want to keep debating this, because it's a very hot topic at the moment, I think. So yeah, it's been a great debate. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you all soon.